Okay. So it's Losar. Happy Losar. It's a celebration. Losar is the Tibetan Lunar New Year. Connor was informing me there's several different Lunar New Years that start at the beginning of lunar cycles. I didn't know that. I thought there was just one that people shared. Um, so I spoke to Lama about this. He's like, so I'm giving a talk. It's going to be on Losar. Like, what should I say about Losar? He said, yeah, it's kind of like, it's celebrated very similar to the way we celebrate the Gregorian calendar New Year in terms of looking at, hey, it's a new year. What didn't work last year? What do we really want to get into this year? Like, let's go ahead and like set some intentions, think of something that we want to work on more. And he said too, like, think about how do we make it fresh? How do we encounter life so that it's not just routine? It's not just the same thing every day over and over again. We're just reacting to the same things the same way, dealing with the same things the same way, thinking about things the same way. Like, how can we at this time, like, really embody the freshness of life and say, like, hey, we're going to move into it in a new kind of magical way? It's going to be fresh. Right. So that's maybe a little bit of like a koan. Oh dear, I'm gonna have to touch my laptop a lot. So my name is Matthew Kruse. I initially started in Buddhism studying Zen. And so this thing I just mentioned, a koan, is very popular in Zen. And so one of the ways that they help students gain enlightenment is through these riddles called koans. And the idea is kind of like if you sit with it and you ponder it and you sit in meditation, like with this question that doesn't really make sense, like eventually something's going to come to you and there's going to kind of be this like aha moment of seeing how reality works. I think that would be incredibly, I would just be upset. Because somebody put me in that position. I study more Soto Zen, which is called Farmer Zen. It's much more slow. They more just like throw you into meditation, and they tend to have the object of meditation is the breath. And then it's just like meditate a lot, right? And I found that to be difficult. I didn't ever create a real relationship with a teacher. And that's very, very necessary to kind of understand what's going on in meditation. But it, I did at the time really like that feeling of kind of like independent warrior like stuff. Turns out that's kind of an obstacle. But at the time, I really enjoyed it. So like a typical koan would be if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Right. And so I'll just spoil a spoiler alert, right? Like I'll just give you that. Like, no, because it takes an ear to hear sound, right? Like I'm sure if the tree falls, there's energy, stuff, but it takes like an eardrum for the energy to hit, and then like a neural network and little bones clicking to hear the sound of that tree, right? Which also means that other animals might be hearing it in a completely different way. But it's kind of supposed to help us like see both the interconnected reality and the fact that things aren't non-dual. It can't really be like me over here and you over there. It's an interactive kind of thing that's happening. Um, so in our lineage, it's a little bit different how we're trained in meditation. Um, and I find it to be really both fascinating and complex, yet very, very straightforward, and just the utmost of compassion, where our ancestors like figured out a step-by-step process and particular types of meditation that help lead us on a path to awakening and it makes sense and nobody's hiding the ball and they just encourage us. Like it just seems so fair and just and kind, right? Um, so that's what I want to talk to you about today. This is one of the paramitas or perfections of a bodhisattva. It's the fifth meditation, meditative concentration. So there's Hinayana teachings, kind of marked by like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. It's often called like personal liberation school. It's a very dignified school. It has a lot to do with renunciation and dealing with one's personal desires in order to see the emptiness of all phenomenon. And then there's the Mahayana perspective, which is broadens a little bit, and it says, well, like we're going to include the Hinayana path, but then we're also going to expand to like I can't truly ever be enlightened without you becoming enlightened. Like it's going to be a group process. And so a bodhisattva is someone who takes on that process wholeheartedly and really focuses on 6 skills. And those 6 skills are generosity, ethical conduct, patience, joyful effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. We are kind of doing them all at once if we're practicing, but we could say if we really wanted to make a strong effort, that it is important to focus on the first 4 in order. And it would really behoove us to really focus in and learn about like, well, what are these teachings on generosity and how do I incorporate that into my life? Because that generosity is actually the basis for ethical conduct. So the ethical conduct does not stem from a dogmatic approach of right and wrong, but comes from a sense of generosity towards all beings and like really wanting to assist and not harm. From there, those 2 fuel patience, which I think, just once we start working with our own generosity and ethical conduct, it becomes very clear how much patience towards the self is involved. So we can't help start giving it to others. And then those things kind of lead to like realizing like, wow, this is really great work. Like I'm starting to like really touch something deeply within myself, and I'm having like really much better interactions with others, and things start to get joyful. The work, right? That place where difficulty becomes a blessing because it means that we get to learn and we get to practice and we get to look at it fresh, right? Instead of the old way of being like, oh, here we go again. You know what I mean? The traffic. Ugh. Right, there's always a chance to practice. But those things need to be established before we can ever actually accomplish meditative concentration. So if we go backwards and unpack those a little bit, it kind of makes sense, right? Like if we're going into meditation and trying to concentrate, but we don't have patience, like how are we going to do that? Like just sit there and focus on one thing. If we don't have patience, that's going to be terrible. If we don't have some sense of like joyful effort, what's like making this a positive endeavor for us, like why would we do that? It takes a lot of energy to sit still and focus the mind, right? So we have to have some of that fuel to do it. And the same with like ethical conduct. We're really dealing with obstacles and discursive thinking, right? So if we're not behaving in ways that we can be proud of, there's going to be a lot going on up there. If we're entering into dramatic situations, if we're getting angry and frustrated a lot, like that's going to affect our meditation. So we're going to need ethical discipline so that our mind is clear and pure. Like we don't have anything to really worry about because we're living as right as we can. And I think always we should be really generous with ourselves because we are engaging in a practice where we want to confront our obstacles, our negative emotions, the things that inhibit us. And so that process is, of course, difficult and makes us look at the darker sides of ourselves. So I think a lot of generosity towards ourselves is necessary to be in that place and be able to handle it in a way that doesn't break us down. So these are my references, and I'm going to read from one right now. I don't type well, so I decided just to put page numbers and read out of the book. So this is Reb Anderson, who's a Soto Zen master from San Francisco Zen Center. We begin the practice of concentration by being generous. This includes being generous towards our mind, even when we are distracted. When we are gracious toward distractions, we immediately become more tranquil. Our ability to be generous enables us to wholeheartedly make our practice of tranquility into a gift for the welfare of all beings. Do we wish our practice to be a gift? When we ask this question, we might notice whether our asking is also a gift, or whether we are asking in order to get answers. We can use our training in ethics to consider if we are trying to get anything out of our practice. It's not ethical to take what is not given, so trying to gain anything other than what we are being given is an ethical infraction. We have developed patience to be present with whatever comes. And now we can notice if we are trying to get away from any painful feelings of body or mind, or trying to hold on to the pleasurable feelings that may occur during concentration. If we are doing those things, we are not practicing patience. Calm, tender, and joyful concentration requires us neither to abide in pleasure nor push away pain. In the practice of heroic effort, joyful effort, we have energized and sustained our enthusiasm for practice. We have contemplated our vow to realize the true Dharma and to teach it for the benefit of all beings. When we remember how wonderful it is to be gently focused on our aspiration, and we feel joy at the thought, we are practicing the fourth paramita. The energy that arises from this can then be given to the practice of concentration. And so take a minute. So this is one, Reb Anderson, Entering the Mind of the Buddha. I think he's very straightforward and like a little bit poetic. He gives a lot of anecdotes, which is helpful. And then I primarily use Geshe Sonam Rinchen from our lineage, the Six Perfections. He's very straightforward, really helpful. Just like, do this, think about this. This is how you contemplate. This is where you're going to go. Like, very helpful. And the Six Perfections by Dale Wright is super intellectualized, like, what's the word I'm looking for? School oriented, university oriented, academic. Thank you. And then this is a new one I'm including for the Six Perfections, Mastering Meditation, Instructions on Calm Abiding and Mahamudra with Chodron Rinpoche. Chodron Rinpoche got left behind in Tibet. He couldn't escape Tibet, and so they had him go into solitary retreat for 19 years. And then he was able to leave and go to India and be at Sarijay Monastery, and him and Lama were close when he was there, and he wrote Lama's long life prayer, which I think is a banger. I mean, if you've listened to many long life prayers, like Lama has a really sweet one. I'll read it for you. Losang, magical display of the deep awareness of all the victorious ones. Merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators. Please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Well, if you read them, you'll see that one's like really special. So Chodron Rinpoche wrote that for Lama. This book, the meditative concentration part is only like 100 pages, and then it goes into Mahamudra, and it has a really great discussion on the preliminaries, which I'm going to briefly touch on later, the preliminaries for meditation. Really, really good book. Highly, highly recommend. But with the disclaimer, if you are not working with Lama as your meditation teacher, I would probably hold off until you have somebody that you would consider a very valid meditation teacher because it is complex. Um, he has a great way of presenting it, but he doesn't hold back on the depth of what he uh, talks about. So I think it has the potential to be very confusing if you're not working with someone that's schooled. So my own uh, experience with meditation was like for some reason being really interested in it and thinking that like it was some sort of key in my existence. And so that's how I found myself studying Zen. And like a few years in, and I, like I said, I wasn't working with a teacher, so I don't recommend that. It just made progress really slow and frustrating. Where working with a teacher is like, oh, I have a lot of really helpful support. But so like at one point, I like, I kept trying to meditate. It was always like loud in my neighborhood. There were like dogs barking, there's construction. And I was like, finally, I kind of went a little nutty, and I was like, I am going to go out in the woods to meditate like far away. And I like found this like distant location. And then I like drove 2 hours to get there, whatever it was, like far, brought a picnic and a blanket and everything. And like, then I just, stopped because it was like down this logging road, like stopped, like walked into the woods far enough so I could even, in case somebody went by on the logging road, maybe I wouldn't even hear them. And like found this really nice like meadow. And I like set everything up in the meadow, like started meditating. And the sun was so freaking hot. Like I was dying, So I was like, okay, it's too hot in the sun. Like I'll just pull into the woods like a little bit so then I'll be okay, And then, okay, if I can just get this perfect, and then like, oh, I'm in the shade, right? And then all of a sudden it was just like, and there were like ants crawling on me and mosquitoes, and they were buzzing so loud, like everything was like zing, zing, and it just seemed like deafening loud. And I had to start laughing, like, but I can't get away from life. Like, there's nowhere to go, it just is like this. There's not a perfect time or a perfect place for me to practice this. Like I'm gonna have to do it, And even in that moment, I said, okay, well, I've already gone to all this trouble to be like way out here, so I'm gonna try. And I realized it was really gorgeous where I was at, and there was like a tree falling down right in front of me, and then the meadow, and I could kind of see how things had changed. Like on one side of the meadow, there was a bunch of like baby trees. You've seen meadows, right? So there's like baby trees, like, oh, they're like, it's like the forest is creeping in on the meadow this way. For whatever reason, on this side, it wasn't getting enough water, so things were dying. It was like, wow, this meadow is kind of like moving slowly. And so I kind of had this like very mild, direct experience of impermanence, like how things just slowly change. And then, kind of in that mind state, I noticed that like there are new sprouts and mushrooms coming out of the log that had fallen in front of me. Like, oh, like there's all these dependent code, arisings happening. Like the death is what the life arises out of, and it needs to die so more life can come. And having that kind of experience, I do still recommend meditating in nature sometimes because nature is our teacher, and Buddhism is very, very focused on nature and the environment and sustainability, and it has a long history of that. Um, but while you might want to go to the woods sometime, you can start now and here. So don't know if I like the name of this thing. I'll just talk about it. So there's shamatha, which is concentration meditation. This portion's kind of like a overview of the types of meditation in our school. So you have like an idea, right? Like, so there's shamatha, which is calm abiding meditative concentration technique, right? And there's 9 stages to that. We will be lucky to get to 3 or 4 living a normal life. Have to make some serious changes if we want to go beyond that. And then there's, once we do get some meditative concentration, there's Vipassana, which is a analytical meditation, which helps us to see the empty nature of self and phenomenon. And that leads to wisdom, which is the next paramita. And then there are additional meditations to support those primary 2. And I should say too, like from this book, the union of shamatha and vipassana like leads into Mahamudra. There seems to be kind of a flow there. I don't want to leave it out. So then there's like other meditations such as direct mind training like Lojong and Tonglen. And so both of those are kind of like how to increase our bodhicitta, our love towards others in order to help them be enlightened, to decrease their suffering, and how to actually like conjure that in ourselves. And then there's, mantra meditation, saying mantras. A lot of times that includes visualization. Mantra means mind. So a lot of people, I've heard it talked about as mind protection. So instead of getting in, it can be really helpful if we're victims of a lot of discursive thinking and that's causing us problems. Saying mantra and visualizing can help the mind concentrate in a way that discursive thought doesn't have quite as much of a foothold or a chance. And then, of course, there's tantric meditation of visualization of a deity. That also both supports concentration and the realization of emptiness and wisdom. So that's like a brief overview. Any questions on different types of meditations we could be doing? Good. Traditional preparatory practices. Like I was saying, in Zen, I meditated for like a decade and really regularly. And I felt very stuck towards the end, and I know now looking back that I was training in some negative mind states. I didn't know how to deal with those mind states. And I think that increased those behaviors in me. And it also created many bad habits in meditation because I hadn't done certain preliminary practices, nor was I working with a teacher, and just not really knowing what I was doing, but still trying very hard. That can be the result. I don't want to say that if you don't do these things or you don't work with a teacher that like it's going to be all bad. I mean, I think I had a chance to learn a lot about the way my particular mind worked, my attachments, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a lot of positive movement in terms of like posture. When I first started meditating, it was like I had held my stomach so tight for so long that when I started trying to release and have a relaxed tummy, my trachea would hurt. Like it felt like it was just being pulled, like my stomach wasn't used to like just relaxing in my body, having that weight pulled down, and that took several years to stop. And I would have like intense shoulder and neck pain. And so those things, in terms of like my posture and my ability to sit increased a lot over that time. So there were positives, but why struggle through the negatives if you don't need to? And it is a powerful practice. You can put yourself in negative places, think you're doing something right, and then start acting out of that negative place. Um, so, and I think, I don't, Reb talks a lot about that. I don't know if I have a quote from him about that, but he was very much, he was like a Golden Gloves boxer before he came to Zen Center. And so he had this inclination to be like super fascist with himself. Like, I can meditate forever in posture without moving, like no matter what, right? Like, um, so that would be an example of how we can get into a negative state. And then I think he was maybe a little bit cold with his contemporaries sometimes because he was practicing that state. So first off in the preliminaries, that's really important, is relying on a spiritual teacher. And then there's this group called the outer preliminaries. So that is contemplating the preciousness of human life, impermanence and death, the suffering of cyclic existence, samsara, and the law of cause and effect, karmic law. So these are things that it's really helpful if we meditate, contemplate, read, talk to a teacher, and kind of become clear to some extent on these topics before we ever start meditating. Like, these should be our first meditations. They also create a sense of meaning, purpose, and direction in our life. And once that palatable feeling is there, a lot of people go into the inner preliminaries, and these are more about the accumulation of merit and purifying obscurities. Lama talks about the accumulation of merit as spiritual power. I like that, right? So that would be, I think, very in line with like joyful effort. And purifying obscurations is a way that, like, when we have resistance, when we have challenges with our own authority, um, laziness, inertia, those types of obscurities, if we go into silent sitting meditation, they can be extremely hard to deal with. These other practices, such as, doing 100 syllable mantras, doing 100,000 prostrations, doing 100,000 mandala offerings, like, those obscurations come up in the process of doing that work. And we're able, in a physical embodied way, I would say in a somatic way, because we're moving physical objects and doing things and using our voice, we're able to encounter and overcome those obstacles in a more supportive way than when we go into the subtle realm of mental concentration. That also includes taking refuge and guru yoga. And it is highly recommended to have a strong foundation in the Lam Rim. Another one from Reb Anderson. Many people try to attain concentration without practicing the first four paramitas. Without the support of the first four practices, we are not ready to relax and let go of the thinking. And he's talking about discursive thinking, which means to wander back and forth in Latin. And then from Geshe Rinchen, essential conditions for achieving calm, abiding meditation are a suitable place, which includes easy access to all needs for sustenance gotten by wholesome means. So you can't steal your food and expect to achieve it. Having few wishes, contentment, freedom from busyness, a wholesome lifestyle, a lack of preoccupation with sense stimulus, ice cream, and good companions. And he says, good companions are those that are prepared to point out your faults, not someone who indulges you. Right. So that's always a real practice. It's like, I love people who directly talk to me in a nice way and point out my faults. Then there's like other people who yell them at me or right, are doing like a really condescending tone. And that's a lot harder to take. And, we don't have to be doormats. So I think even like if it's really a friend that's gonna address us like that. I think in the whole Buddha field, we can accept the other ones, but maybe if it's kind of obnoxious or difficult behavior, we're allowed to keep them like over here. We don't have to bring them all the way in here to get that criticism. So why meditate? Sounds tough, right? That's a lot. Having gotten to meditation and I'm almost done with the talk. Since cyclic existence is the cause of suffering, the only way to rid ourselves of suffering is to gain freedom from cyclic existence. The ignorance that lies at its root cannot be eradicated except by gaining special insight into the nature of reality. Without such special insight, it is unattainable without the development of a calmly abiding mind. Did that make sense? I feel like I chopped it up a little bit. Okay. That was from Geshe Rinchen. Then Reb Anderson offers, great compassionate vows live in the hearts of bodhisattvas. By becoming concentrated in their vows, bodhisattvas deeply settle into, protect, and finally become completely one with them. Supported by the power of concentration, they are eventually able to stand steadfast in an unstable world and act in accord with their vows no matter what comes. I did not attribute this next one. Let's see if we can figure out who said it. Reality, the selflessness of persons and other phenomena, is like a form to be seen, and understanding is like the eye. If the form is too distant from the eye, it cannot be seen clearly. But when a steady hand, when a steady hand is used to bring the form close, every detail can be perceived. A calm, abiding mind is like the steady hand. That's Geshe Rinchen. Okay, how we doing? Should we talk about how to meditate? Do we got that in us? Okay. Posture is generally described as sitting upright. So we want to be like on our sit bones. And then our base, usually to be really comfortable, we want to sit for a while. We're going to want a pillow or something under us because we're going to want the hip creases above our knees. If our knees are at level or above our hip creases, we're going to be feeling like we're doing this a lot. There's going to be a lot of like jerk stuff going on with our hip flexors. So knees below, and it should kind of be a triangle of support. So you got your sit bones, 2 feet, 2 knees, something like that. You want a triangle to support the spine. Spine is nice and upright. Just mildly open, like an open heart, but you just want your shoulders in line with your ears, and then your nose in line with your navel. And your gaze is going to be down, like if you went out from your belly button about 2 feet, like that's where your gaze is going to be. So, right, if you go to the floor, it's going to be further out. You know what I mean? Like that kind of angle. But eyes slightly open. We want to be able to practice with visual stimulus. That's it. Hands, you can like place them just like this on your thighs. Cosmic Mudra is another one that's really popular in this tradition. Then there's breathing. Supposed to read 7 to 88. Being coercive is not conducive to the concentration practice of bodhisattvas. When I was young and new to Zen practice, I heard an instruction to control body, breath, and mind. Counting each exhalation was suggested as a way to control the breath and develop calm. When I tried this, I frequently lost count, so I would go back and start counting from the beginning. At a certain point, I decided I had to coerce myself in order to be consistent in following my breath, and I had to count it correctly. I threatened myself with physical pain to stick a pin in my thigh if I noticed that I forgot the practice. Under this threat, I never actually needed to stab myself, and I got myself almost entirely under what I thought was control. This felt really mean and dead, and it was not what I came to Zen practice to learn. Before I came to Zen, I already knew how to be mean. I came to learn to be kind, flexible, and relaxed in body, speech, and mind. But instead of becoming more open, I was becoming more closed. I almost succeeded in ruining my precious practice by that kind of oppressive cruelty. Nobody told me to be that hard on myself, but I was. I forgot that I was doing this practice out of love. Fortunately, I realized that if I continued trying to control myself in this joyless way, I was going to quit. I stopped being excessive in my effort to concentrate by not being too hard on myself, and I have been able to continue and haven't quit. But in fact, some of my friends who also practice with me sincerely were too hard on themselves, and they have quit. So I think that's a good way to think of breathing in terms of like relaxed, open. We just kind of want to find like a rhythmic, natural state, a not controlled state. You know, as Lama says, like have the experience of the universe breathing us instead of us controlling the breathing. So that, you know, especially if we haven't done those preliminary practices, it's really important to develop like that sense of friendliness and spiritual energy for ourselves. And then we need to pick an object of meditation. So like Chojor Rinpoche says many people have achieved calm abiding with sticks and stones as their object, but that there's more helpful things for us to pick, such as a Buddha statue, because then we're also accumulating merit just by becoming familiar with it and looking at the pleasant features. It's typically going to be like gold or yellow in color, again, to provide like energy, positivity, wealth to our practice. And that's going to be about half a thumb size, 2 feet out from the belly is where we're going to want to place it, around there. And so one way would be just looking at the statue or the image. And that can be really helpful because there's a very similar function when our mind controls our eye organ to stay focused on the image or statue. It's a very similar function than the mind being concentrated, being balanced. The way we focus our eyes is going to feel very similar to the same way we focus our mind. So if we start with a visual object and can practice staying focused and clear, having clarity in that object, then eventually, once we're very familiar with that object, we can take it away and then just visualize that object. And now we're coming to both holding something mentally and staying concentrated on it. And we have some idea of kind of the experience of what it is to keep clarity and focus on that object. And then Chojor Rinpoche recommends if we're really struggling with discursive thought, our mind wandering a lot, the breath is very helpful. Take us out of our mind, get us more in our body. And it is a body practice, so I know I'm talking a lot about focusing the mind, but there's not really any separation. So we do need to be feeling or experiencing our body. Same time, Chojor Rinpoche says there are non-Buddhists who, for an object of calm abiding, take stones and sticks, small rocks and small twigs, and actualize calm abiding. Mainly, calm abiding arises more easily if one observes the object with which one has the greatest familiarity. However, if we observe the holy body of the Buddha while abiding in calm abiding, we will accumulate merit and cleanse obscurations. We will be reminded of a special objective basis of prostrations and offering. The great difference from merely observing stones and sticks is that by observing the holy body of the Buddha, we will remember the Buddha. And on the way, we will easily accumulate vast stores of merit and virtue. We'll be reminded of the object of refuge and field of merit, and so forth. So we want to hold an object, whether it's the breath, statue, or visualizing. We want to concentrate on it fully and not leave that object with our mind. And clarity of the object is really important. How clear do we see it? So that takes energy. So the 5 faults that keep us from doing that task our inertia or laziness. That's generally before we even get on the cushion. We're just not meditating. Forgetting the instructions, right? Just kind of sitting there and being like, slackness or excitement. So that's right. Like I always think of excitement as like, oh, I'm going to do this and that. I've got a list going, and laxity is kind of a little more dreamy, like, oh, man, that time I was this and that, like these kind of feelings. And so that will take us away from the object. And then the fourth fault is not applying the antidotes. So if those things that I was just talking about are happening and we don't apply an antidote, we won't get through the obscuration. And then there is a point where the mind becomes so attuned to concentration that people are applying antidotes when there's no problem. And so the fifth fault is applying antidotes when it's unnecessary. So the antidotes are appreciating the benefits derived from mental stabilization, an aspiration to attain meditative stabilization, enthusiastic effort attaining meditative stabilization, and pliancy or flexibility. So those first four are all just to get us on the cushion. Those all counteract inertia or laziness. The fifth antidote is mindfulness, counteracts forgetfulness. The six, mental alertness, vigilance, counteracts laxity and excitement. Seven, apply the antidotes. And eight, don't be overzealous. So overzealousness is counteracted by not applying the antidotes. Easy, right? Should we try it? Like do a short one? We do it. We'll get into just a couple minutes. really goes. That's an instruction for meditation too. Just like, you know how there's that space if you're really listening to the bell where you can't quite tell if that's the bell. Are you imagining the bell anymore as it goes quiet? That space right there. Kind of staying right in that space and holding it and really listening. I think I want to mention is pain. You want to try not to move just because, like, we're already trained to be jiggly little creatures that like go off on tangents and get distracted by everything. So we try not to move, but that's not some sort of like fascist endeavor where we sit until we hurt ourselves. So please be kind. There's a lot more on breathing, and I'll end with a quote from Wright. As one Mahayana sutra puts it, the Bodhisattva approaches perfect wisdom, apperceives it, enters into it, understands it, reflects on it, examines, investigates, and develops it with acts of mind that have abandoned all deception and deceit, all conceit, the exaltation of self, all laziness, the deprecation of others, the notion of self, bless you, the notion of a being, gain, honor, and fame, the five hindrances, envy and meanness, and all vacillation. Then we can see why such a person would be thought capable of almost anything. Compared to these achievements in the domain of character, the magical powers imagined are not so impressive. Yeah, here I'll read the list of things that a Buddha engages without. They have abandoned all deception and deceit, all conceit, the exaltation of self, all laziness, the deprecation of others, the notion of a self, the notion of a being, gain, honor, and fame, the five hindrances, envy and meanness, and all vacillation. Move beyond all those things. Any questions? Hi, Susan.
Thanks for your talk.
Sure.
Maybe I missed it or forgot it, but where does metta fit into the types of meditation?
Metta, loving kindness meditation. It would be. I mean, I'm calling it right now supportive for concentration. I don't want to make it seem um, like somehow diminished by being supportive. Yeah,
It can also be one of the preliminaries if you're
Yes.
using the four immeasurables as a preliminary practice. So, yeah.
it is definitely.
There was one that you mentioned was bodhicitta.
Mhm.
Which one was that? Would that fit there?
So metta practice increases bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the wish to become enlightened in order to save all beings. So like loving kindness, lojong, things like that are all increasing our understanding of the way things actually are, and the more we understand the way things are, that love will arise in us of bodhicitta. Pleasure.
Thanks, Matthew. I really want to use visualization in my practice. but I find it incredibly difficult to do, even if, I try to follow the instruction and actually have the object and then eventually remove it. And it doesn't matter how familiar I am. I mean, I could stare at something. I try things that I'm intimately familiar with and I can't visualize. And I don't think it's one of those neurological things where I can't visualize. I can see things, I can imagine things, but I can't actually concentrate on any form of visualization whatsoever. Uh, like I kind of, for example, if I was going to use the statue that we have up there, the Buddha, I might be able to see little aspects of it, the hand touching the ground or the holding the bowl or the long earlobes or something like that. I can see features of it, but never the entire image, and it's very, very unsteady. And I recognize it's probably because my mind's unsteady, but I was wondering if you had some tips on how to sort of increase the clarity and sort of the totality or completeness of a visualization.
That's a good question. This practice is extremely humbling. So one helpful thing would be more preliminaries, right? Like actually doing the preliminaries to gain that power, the spiritual power. Then it's also recommended that we can do it in very short bursts. So, even like a couple minutes, just really hold the image and then rest. Take a lap around the house, get yourself some juice, whatever, come back, right? So it doesn't have to be as long as when it's supported by a physical object, and to just be kind to ourselves and allow that to build. And then there is instruction on, in terms of being able to hold the whole image clearly, is very, very advanced. And that could be very difficult living a householder life. That kind of ability is generally reserved for people who have created the causes and conditions where they can be in a place where there's little to no distractions and they can focus on calm abiding meditation most of the day. So what's recommended in building toward that is it's okay to do like just the face, like just the hands, and we can actually like kind of build upon. So if we like pick one place of the image and like are able to hold that steady with clarity consistently, then we can expand to more of the image. Any other questions? Or online? Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Matthew. Thank you for your talk.
1 second. Can't quite hear you. Maybe try now.
Hello, hello.
Not,
Testing. One,
not
two,
just
three.
yet. Okay. Could you put it in the chat, Andrew? We're having a
Ooh,
hard time getting sound from Zoom.
this is going to be kind of hard.
Okay. I'll call you later.
Okay.
Maybe we should move on to dedication.
Dedication. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme bodhicitta, jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chen Rinzing Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the teachings of the Buddha flourish, and may the upholders of the teachings remain forever. May all migrators achieve happiness, and may they fulfill all their temporary and ultimate goals. Lotus Song, magical display of the deep awareness of all the victorious ones, merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators, please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectless compassion, Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages, Longsong Drapa, I make request at your holy feet. Are there any announcements? I know that Susan has one.
And Eli, Jessica had something in the chat. What did she have? So does she, Jessica, did you want to share something? Yeah. Oh, okay. Just, okay. That's, okay, yeah. Yeah, there we
I just
go.
figured you
Okay.
wouldn't be able to hear me, so.
Okay. Okay, now we got that straightened out. I just wanted to remind everybody that next weekend is the beginning of the Sustainable Service Program. So I think Patty's going to send out another announcement today, but it's also in the weekly announcements. You can sign up ahead of time through Eventbrite or register when you come on Saturday. So it's, we'll have registration at the door if you're not sure if you're going to be able to make it at this point. But Saturday morning, you wake up and go, oh, you know what? I think I'll go to that workshop. So yeah, that's it.
So I just like to remind people about on the 29th, there's going to be a half-day meditation, the union of shamatha and vipassana, led by Lama Jinpa from 8 to 12. So is this the camera I look at? I don't know. But anyway, everybody's welcome. It's open to everyone. The retreat. I can't mention it. Okay, so the other, I just was brought to my attention about the meditation retreat that's from April 11th to April 13th at Lotus View Ranch. And if you've taken refuge or participated in entering the path, then you'll be eligible to participate in that retreat, which is an amazing, led also by Lama, that's Mahamudra Dzogchen retreat. And everyone that's ever gone has always wanted to come again and again. So that's the other thing.
Patty, Marie had a question of whether or not the 29th would also be on Zoom.
Oh gosh, Maria's been with us for like 20 years, and that's so hard to tell you, Marie, that particular thing is not available online. So I'm so sorry to tell you that. Thank you.
Hey everyone, so we recently got a really nice little kiosk here, making donations a little easier. So yeah, if you enjoy your time here and whatnot, it's totally optional. We love to just spread the Dharma. But yeah, if you'd like to give a little contribution, it can be any amount. There's some like little presets on here.
yeah, come on by, and yeah, this should work with cart. So yeah, swing on by, and we'll start doing this probably after every Sunday talk kind of thing, and then yeah, come on by. Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Omo araya pazayana indi Om araya pazana